Assalamu alaikum. Welcome again and again, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming. We have today again Daniel Cheong in the Cityscape photography. We hope that you enjoy this lecture, and I have something to say. We will have a small break in the middle of the session, as Daniel will organize it. About 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Do it as you wish. And afterwards, ladies and gentlemen, there will be certificates outside. Please take your certificate after the session, not during the session. Thank you very much.
So everybody's hearing me, okay? Yeah. Ola, should I start now? Yes. Okay. So, okay, let me see. Okay, so first of all, thank you all for joining this session. As Ola mentioned, this is my, my second presentation here. About 2 years ago, I was doing a similar presentation, and I'm very happy to be back. I mean, I love this this venue. I mean, it's wonderful. Actually, I remember here, if you raise the curtain, you'll get a beautiful cityscape view here. And also, HIPA has a very special place in my heart, since I was lucky enough to win a prize during the HIPA competition in the Cityscape, in the night photography contest about 2 years ago. So today I'm here to go through a bit of my my latest Cityscape work, and also try to introduce you to all the different techniques that I use. And at the end, I will, for the first time, I'm redoing that in a lecture, do some Photoshop demonstration of actually creating two different shots, and using all the different techniques that I will go through here. So first of all, I'd like to talk a bit about myself. So I was born in Mauritius. For those who might not know, that's a very tiny island here in the Indian Ocean, and Dubai is just around here. It's a beautiful tropical island with beautiful seascapes. Not much of cityscapes there. So I'm actually from Chinese descent. Actually, I'm like 75% Chinese and 25% French, or French with a little bit of African origin also, because my mother was, we say they are Creole, so she was half French, half, let's say, African. And so and as my background in studies, I'm not at all, studied photography ever. My background is more software engineering. I earned a master's degree in computer science 30 years ago now. That's very far away. At that time, you could tell that I was a kind of a computer geek, when I was young. At that time was the time of the Apple II computer, for those who haven't learned about it. And I was, cracking software, and actually buying games, for instance, trying to crack them, and then to sell them in small quantities at very low price. That's what I was doing to earn some money when I was a student. And at that time, we could not really talk about piracy, but that was kind of, I really always enjoyed being in the high-tech world. And that drove me to work in the mobile phone industry for almost 27 years. And about 2 years ago, the company I was working with had a lot of reorg, and unfortunately, I lost my job there. So at that time, I decided to become a full-time photographer, at least try. And so I've been doing that for the last 2 years. And it's for sure it's a bit different than having a regular job in the corporate world. So so more stressful, but at the same time, I get to do which is my passion. So this passion started really, let's say, I always liked to do photography since I was a kid. You know, I got my first camera when I was 10 years old. Like, it was a film Kodak Instamatic camera. You had those cartridge as the film. And I moved to digital cameras very early, you know, as soon as they were on the market back in 1998. And but you know, at that time, okay, it was cool to shoot and get the pictures on the computer, but after that, nothing else happened. You know, you could barely share them with anyone because you know, unless you printed them. So, but you know, I still continued to upgrade my camera until 2006, when I bought my first DSLR, and at that time I was working in Singapore, and I've always been attracted to architecture, cityscape. So and being in Singapore, that was a great opportunity for me to start really shooting cityscape. I mean, you have wonderful cityscape in Singapore, and so this is when also I got to know about photo sharing website like Flickr. So Flickr has played, I guess, a real fundamental role is to what I am today. This is where I got to get exposure around the world, and you know, starting to be contacted by magazines, and even started to make money out of photography as a hobby. And so then, you know, later I moved to Dubai in 2008. And this is where I really continued to embrace cityscape photography, and this is when I start. You know, at that time it was quite easy to access to rooftops, either bribing security or having friends who live in the building or anything like that. And when I really started to get a lot of exposure when I started to post those fog shots I did from the index tower. And I guess also at that time there was not so many people who had been accessing those this amazing tower with the best view on where we are now, you know, the Dubai and Burj Khalifa. So now, as I said, since 2 years, I try to make a living out of it. So doing like commercial work, you know, interior, some real estate, and then that's the most fun part, I guess. That would be this one, where really I started to work with Danny Eid here, who's my partner for the workshops, and we launched those rooftop workshop. And so our next workshop would be in Iceland, coming in about 2 weeks. And also we'll have, before going to Iceland, we'll have a workshop in Amsterdam. And then we have actually 2 workshops in October. And the big one would be the one in Namibia coming in January. So anyone interested should either check my Facebook page or Danny's, or both our website, where you can get all the details for this amazing place to shoot landscape here. And I also do occasionally online workshops through Skype. It's been working pretty well for people who are not obviously based in Dubai. So I've been teaching with people all over the world. Some achievement. I'm recently been nominated brand ambassador for 500px, and also now I'm an ambassador for NiSi filters. I will come to that a little bit later, tell you also what's the benefit of using those filters. And also I'm a brand ambassador for a German-based company called FLM, which are doing very, very good tripods. And of course, you know, in 2015, I won the HIPA, one of the HIPA prize in the night category. I also have a book been published in many magazines and websites. And my latest publication was in July in Practical Photography UK, where there's a 8-page on my kind of cityscape photography also. And kind of all the brands so far which I've been associated with. So I guess every photographer has kind of a certain vision of what they want to share with other, with all the community, because this is about that, sharing your photos. You take photos because you want people to look at them, to share them on social media. So my vision of photography is to basically, explore places, whether it's cityscape, landscape, and my obsession is even when you look at a landscape which is, not so very exciting, just sometimes a lake and some mountains, what can you do to give a wow factor to that landscape or cityscape? So already you have to think when you're on location, what's the final product that you're going, or the final photography that you want to create. And from that, you will start taking different exposures, using filters, without filters, using different techniques. And just that this will be like a jigsaw that you will put together to give you the final image that you want to have. And this image is not necessarily something that has to be real. For me, I'm not doing journalistic photography. I just want to create sometimes things close to reality, but sometimes a bit of a surreal thing that your eyes cannot see. So to do that, so I have you have two parts, the shooting part, and then once you get all your exposure, you get back on your computer, you have the post-processing part. So for the shooting techniques, so the basic of my technique is something called bracketed exposure. So I will develop all of those in a slide that will come. So I use a lot of Panorama, and again, Panorama, you have different techniques here, single row, multi-row. You have vertical Panorama. It's a technique that I've been recently teaching through a webinar on 500px. Focus stacking, also this is something that is very useful in some situations in landscape photography, or it can be used also in product photography or macro photography, but this is not really my domain here. Long exposure with ND meaning neutral density. I will come to that also, what it means. And also something that I've been doing recently, because you will notice that most of my cityscape photography are shot at the so-called blue hour, so which is the time just after sunset, when it's a transition between sunset and really dark. So I was not a big fan of shooting when it was really dark, but then NiSi came with that so-called natural night filter, which for me really gives a much better clean look at night shots and very attracting colors. So because of that filter, I've been finding myself now to shoot at night, because the problem with the blue hour, it's only like 10 minutes, so you really have not so much time. Sometimes I don't even have time to really shoot a panorama, because I'm shooting bracketed and I'm shooting multiple shots, so it takes time. I find myself running out of the blue hour. So then when it comes to night, then you have the whole night to do whatever you want. So this kind of remotivated me to go out to shoot at night. And something that I call alternate reality, again, it's kind of a way of bending reality by combining exposures of things that happen in that frame that you are shooting, but at different times. So you end up creating something that doesn't really exist, but which is an alternate reality, actually a reality that I wanted to see. So bracketed exposure, very simple. Most of the cameras today have this feature called exposure bracketing. So what it does is you tell your camera to shoot a set of shots, and the camera will choose for you the different shutter speed that will go. So you end up having a very underexposed shot, but where you can start, where you can see details, you know, in the highlight. This would be my middle shot. Let's say if I didn't have bracketing, I would shoot one shot, the camera will give me this, you know. So the camera is struggle to get the right exposure, because it's a situation where I'm shooting, the sun is behind the cloud, but the camera is struggling to get details in the shadows and details in the highlights. So the details in the shadows are really here. And the details in the highlights, the detail in the highlights over here. So this is where today there is not a single camera which has what we call a high dynamic range, high enough to be able to get a picture that you have all details in the shadows and the highlights. So so most of the time, if you are going to shoot with me, you will hear my camera shooting like, in this one is 7 shots. It could be, the number of brackets depends of how challenging is the light. So if it's like a blue hour, I would take 5 shots. And if it's like a real sunset with the sun facing you, I might shoot up to 9 shots. So for that, Nikon is good because it's very flexible in terms of how many brackets you can shoot, and also you have to specify what's the stop between each bracket. Panorama. So you know, as a landscape photographer or cityscape, you know, I want to capture as wide as I can. So of course you can use ultra wide angle, which give you like a field of view maybe 160 degrees, and then up to fisheye, which give you almost 180 degrees. But sometimes you have, in some situation, I will explain why. You're better off by shooting a panorama. Let's say in that case here, these are 4 shots that I shot from the Cayenne Tower, you know, a very famous tower in the Dubai Marina. And I've been using a lens called a tilt shift lens. So what you can see here is if I was shooting with a normal ultra wide angle and I didn't want to have any distortion in the building, I will have to shoot straight. So I will end up having half sky and half cityscape. You know, I will miss a lot of the foreground here. So by using this this tilt shift lens, by the way, if there is any issue with the audio, just tell me, because sometimes this thing is falling down. So what I'm doing here, I'm shooting in portrait, as you can see, and I'm shifting down the lens, and you can see there's no distortion at all, but I'm able to capture a lot more of the foreground here. So by stitching those 4 shots, so what happened here is actually I took bracketed shots of all of these, so maybe 5 shots here, 5, 5, 5. I blended them together and then stitch them to get that final shot here. So this is, we call it a single row because my camera shot only 1 row here of exposures. The final size this one I think would be usually it's around 80 megapixel, sometimes 120 megapixel. Depends how many shots you took. And because I'm shooting with a D810, which is already 36 megapixel. So if you count 36 times 4, but plus the overlap, yeah, you end up having between 70 to 100. So there is another technique which I use, again, using a tilt shift lens. This time I'm shooting in landscape, and I'm shifting the lens left or right. So this is the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. So I'm shifting my lens on the left, and here I'm shifting my lens on the right. And then, of course, by combining those two, you get a very nice, no distortion-free, very wide angle. The problem with when you do panoramas by shooting portrait and rotating the lens, you will, this will not appear here, but if you have like straight lines very close in the foreground, they will appear curved. So I'm not a big fan of that, but that's because of the focal length of the lens with which you shoot the panorama. So the A10 and Nikon 19mm tilt shift. This is, to be honest with you, this is the lens I'm exclusively using nowadays, even for landscape. I love this lens. I mean, it's very extremely sharp. It's one of the latest lens from Nikon, so it has all the latest technology in it in terms of optics. And also, so that's why you will see me doing a lot of panorama using this lens, because 19mm it's not wide enough sometimes, you know, compared to a 14. So now the multi-row panorama here. So where you can see that this one I wanted to, you know, I could have just stick with that series here, but I wanted to, you know, when you have clouds, you don't want to, especially in Dubai, it's so rare, you don't want to lose those clouds. So here you see that maybe I was shooting straight with the tilt shift lens, and this one I'm shifting down the lens. So again, rotate, shoot, shift down, again, you do that, and then you end up having a even bigger panorama with much more of the sky here. Yeah, so you have to kind of deal with that. So, yeah. But then what you do is either you wait that when there's no metro to take your shot, or you have to find a way. It can get complicated, but it's possible. You know, it means taking more shots, change the shutter speed also to capture. Because most of the time, if it's as a metro and you're doing a 10-second exposure, you will not see anything. So there's a lot of techniques involved.
I meant the rail that's broken off. Not stitching properly.
No, usually it should stitch properly. It means you have not done it, you know, either on a properly horizontal plane or not enough overlap. So panorama is something that has to be handled very carefully, using sometimes a panoramic head or something called a nodal rail. So, and then you have which is one of my favorite techniques, because also, you know, doing all those panorama, it's a lot of work. You see a lot of exposures. The vertical panorama, you deal with less exposure. That's why I like it. So, for instance, here I'm shooting a scene where I'm kind of shifting up to capture, you know, the top of the frame, shifting down to capture the bottom, and then still I was not happy with the foreground here. So, you know, when you shift down and then you cannot shift more down, you have to tilt the whole camera and lens, which I did. So I tilted a little bit more. So you can see already when I tilt the lens, you get the building start to go like this, you know. That's normal. But again, Photoshop will stitch that and do the correction. So those three, you end up having a very nice vertical panorama. So I also, because I will be talking about Vertorama, normal panorama. So now you have a better understanding of what is a classic panorama as opposed to what is a vertical panorama. Focus stacking. So this is where, okay, I'm shooting a kind of a mix of seascape and cityscape here, and I have a very close object in the foreground, and I'm shooting this one with the 1424, very wide angle. So what you don't really see here, but if you zoom in, so I've focused on that rock here first to make sure the foreground is focused. When I do that, and I'm shooting at f8, the buildings are a little bit blurred. That's normal because you know, when you're focusing, unless if I maybe was shooting at f22, I might get something focused from here to here. But for a reason I will explain later, I don't like to shoot at those apertures. So I'm most of the time sticking at f8 or f11. So when I do that, unfortunately, you cannot get everything sharp. So my foreground, the rock, will be very sharp, but my background here will be slightly blurred. It might not be visible on Instagram, but when you do a big print, it will be visible. So first, so that's why I do one shot here with a focus here. And then, secondly, I do one shot with a focus on the building. So that's where you get very sharp building here, and of course, a blurred, a little bit blurred foreground. So then, by using this technique of focus stacking, which Photoshop has, you know, it's a function within Photoshop. You don't have to do anything complex. You just say, I want to focus stack all those images, and it will do it for you. So this one here, you know, it was just 2 shots, but you might have, you know, if you want to be extra sharp all the way, you might do one focus here, one here, one here, one here. So you have 4. So, and then you put that in Photoshop. It will sort out what's blurred, what's not blurred, and will give you a 100% sharp photo from bottom to, from foreground to background. So long exposure with neutral density filters. This is one shot, ISO 100 f8, 1.3 second. And you know, most of the landscape photographers, this is okay. It's a normal shot, but what you want is that kind of extra surreal atmosphere. So just by putting a filter, which is here a 6 stop, so it means it's blocking the light 6 times from you know, it's really reducing the light a lot. So for that, I had to expose for like 60 seconds. So it means my shutter was open for 60 seconds, meaning that since you have clouds and they are moving, so the movement of the cloud will leave that kind of impression on your sensor. So which will give you which for me I found a more interesting cloud than just normal puffy clouds like that. So I use a lot ND filters, which you also can get the same nice effect on the water. And this NiSi natural night filter. So just to give you like a comparison here. So you know, without filter and out of the camera, auto white balance. So in Dubai, because of the lighting of the street, which is very warm, it tends to give you like a warm color, which you can, in a way, adjust by playing with the white balance. But honestly, when I was shooting that, the Sheikh Zayed was not that yellow. You know, it was more of between yellow to orange. So the night filter, this is out of the camera. So again, I don't like the result of the night filter just out of the camera. You need to do some post-processing. So in that case, I'm just adjusting the white balance to give a cooler look to the cityscape. But then, you know, it's a matter of taste. You know, when I posted that on my Facebook, oh no, I prefer that one. I don't like this one. So you know, it comes down to what you like. For me, I do like this color for the streets, and also I managed to get the same kind of sky just by playing with the white balance without filter. So, and of course, people can argue that playing with hue saturation lightness, you can also change that into red. So it can be an endless debate. And everything can be done with or without filters. So this one, let's say it removed me one step of you know, trying to adjust selectively this color. Because there's no selective color adjustment. You know, it's all global. So it does a pretty good job on the buildings, and it fixes the street lights pretty nice. So in terms of when it comes to on Photoshop, so of course Photoshop is my main tool. I don't use Lightroom. That might surprise a lot of people, but I've always used Photoshop from the beginning. So even for cataloging my own files, I have my own way of organizing the files. I know Lightroom for sure. It's a great tool for organizing your files in libraries, tagging, all that. But you know, I have so many shots now. If I had to go back to reorganize, I have tens of thousands of files that I would have to reorganize in Lightroom, so I kind of gave up. So I can live with that. And also, of course, Google Nik Collection is it's mandatory in my workflow, and it's a free software from Google. Unfortunately, they will not maintain, meaning Photoshop might break the compatibility with Google software in the future, but so far it's still working. So I also sometimes do use HDR software, instead of using the manual digital blending. So I recommend this software here, but it's only for Windows. Otherwise, you can still use the Nik HDR effects, which is free from Google also. And when it comes to the digital blending, so you have two main techniques. One which is a very manual, and that you will see when I do the Photoshop demo at the end. And something called luminosity mask, which is a kind of technique which is avoid a lot of manual work, but I'm still, this means also maybe a lot of more work in your workflow, so I try to stick with simple things. The panorama stitching, so I use this software called AutoPano, because of course Photoshop does have its own panorama stitching function, but it's when you're shooting with a tilt shift lens, for some reason it's struggling a lot, and sometimes it cannot even stitch at all. So that's why I'm using the third party here. I try to avoid using third-party software, but and another tool that I use a lot, especially when you do architecture shot, called a perspective warp. I will give you an example later. So quickly, I will go through some shots and tell you exactly how it was done. So I guess we are in that building here. So this was done 1 year and a half ago or 2 years ago, from the Address Hotel, which was under construction. And this shot basically kind of has all the techniques that I use. So it's a vertical panorama using 3 shots, and I will do that live for you at the end. And multiple exposures, and also you can see here the fountains, which are very clear. And this is also mixing exposures at different shutter speed, because to the cityscape you have to the shutter speed would be like 10-15 second shutter speed, but to be able to capture the fountains, you have to be in the 1/200 second shutter speed. So you have, in order to get that kind of shutter speed in low light, especially the fountain started when the blue hour was already gone. So already this is an alternate reality, because you have the fountain show, which didn't happen at the same time as I took the whole thing here. So this is a way of bending reality. So this one, to shoot the fountain, I had to crank up my ISO to like 3200 and shoot like 1/200 seconds. And so when you look at the exposure for the fountain, you only see the fountain, the rest is completely dark. Here, same technique, multiple exposure. One long exposure for the sky. I really like those kind of a cloud streak, which are due to the long exposure. So maybe this one is only like 30 seconds, not that long. And you have another challenge here, the animation on Burj Khalifa. This is something that you need less than 1 second shutter speed to be able to capture. Otherwise, you will not be able to capture those details, because they are moving. So you end up having something very blurry without any specific form or texture. So again, multiple exposures, multiple shutter speed, different ISO thing. And this is, let's say, my when I'm lazy and I want to capture as well as possible, but I don't want to do a panorama, because to do that as a multi-row panorama, forget it, because you will just see the challenge here. you will never be able to stitch the sky because the clouds would have moved when you are here, and when you move your camera to shoot that part, it would be something completely different. So out of the question to do long exposures with sky and panorama. So I have this 16 mm fisheye, which is a tiny lens, but absolutely very sharp. I mean, not as sharp as the 19 mm, but pretty good sharp. And the key is you need a plug-in for Photoshop to straighten up the building, because when you shoot the fisheye, you know, the building will be on the edge will be curved like that, so they don't look really nice. Panorama again, 19 mm tilt shift, shot from a very nice viewpoint in Dubai Marina. This is one of my, I guess, my favorite viewpoint to shoot that particular, you know, tallest block in the world here. So I had the opportunity to go there, thanks to Heidi, who is here. And the same, okay, this is the blue hour, and this is the night version using the natural night filter. And there is really like, it does something to the colors which I like very much. It's a bit difficult to explain, but I'm more of a person who likes more like cool colors for Cityscape. So this filter gives you that nice cool colors. Again, same technique here. You know, with again, I had to shoot. The Cityscape was shot with 2 exposures. You know, because I didn't need to do too much of blending. This part was a bit challenging because again, you know, Dubai, a lot of construction site, lots of very powerful lights on the construction site. So this one was too bright, so I had to use a darker shot to correct this, and then did a special shot at 1/200 ISO 3000, let's say, for the fountain. And this one is more like a 1 second or half a second exposure. Maybe not, I didn't have to go too high on the ISO. The panorama that you see, you know, shifting left and right, it's for me, this is the best way to do panoramas, because you avoid absolutely distortion, especially if let's say there was like there was a straight line here, it would have been curved on the conventional panorama, like typically here. Yeah. So this is again, it's a shot I took in Paris, and it's using multiple exposures. And I combine it with HDR software, so shifting left, shifting right, and also using ND1000 filter to flatten that water here. If I wanted to do that as a conventional panorama shooting portrait, no way I would have been able to keep those lines straight like that. It would have been distorted, and there's nothing you can do about it. Vertical panorama, again, allows you to really kind of get a square format, and also capturing what's really down. Otherwise, with my 1424 lens, I would have only been able to capture that part here. So same technique here, digital blending, because lots of challenging lights, you know, strong lighting on the tower, very dark areas in the park here. And also, when I was shooting with my 1424, I was barely capturing that part, you know. And then when in front of you, you get beautiful reflection, you want to get the whole thing. So, and then there is no other way to capture that scene than vertical panorama. No camera in the world with any lens will give you that shot. It's impossible. Maybe in the future. Same here, lots of different shots for the sky, long exposure. You will see, I will give you all the different shots that I used to create that one. You see, it was very challenging because lots of cars and lights, and so I had to do like maybe 8 or 9 different exposures here. One of my last panorama, which I did from the Dubai Marina Mall, and again, so this one is quite big, 168 megapixel, because it's actually having 5 shots for the top and 5 shots for the bottom. And I had to use 3 exposures each to correct the exposure on the top and the bottom. So lots of, let's say, 10 times, I did like 50 bracketed shots to shoot that. So this is where it's challenging at the blue hour, because to shoot 5 brackets during the blue hour, I will shoot shutter speed between 1 second to 30 seconds. So when you add 5, it's almost like 1 minute per set. So 1 minute here, 1 minute here, 1 minute here. So already I'm spending 5 minutes for the top here, and I'm spending 5 minutes for the bottom, and the blue hour is gone. So already when I was shooting this part, I could see that the sky color was changing already. So you have some challenges in post-production to make sure that the sky, which was supposed to be the same as here, might be a bit too dark. So you have to artificially readjust the brightness of the sky, so that Photoshop does an absolutely great job to not Photoshop, but the Panorama software, to make sure that even if your sky is not exactly the same luminosity, it will do something like that is seamless. But that's the challenge for shooting Panorama in Dubai, when the Dubai blue hour is very short. And just to give you an idea of the sharpness, so just at this part here, and at 100%, this is 100% crop of the shot. So you can even clearly see all the writing. So it's the 19 mm. It's a crazy sharp lens. Another, again, multi-row panorama here, but 85 megapixel. That's the shot I presented to you at the beginning, and again, very, this was a 19 mm, very sharp lens. And multi-row, 2 rows, that's why it's a bit bigger. And again, extreme sharpness of that lens. Here is a technique that I'm also teaching in my workshop. So again, vertical panorama, the top part here, the bottom part. And here what I did is, once I've shot these two, the top and the bottom, before the light show started, then I adjusted my camera settings so that I needed like one second exposure, because I didn't want to expose for too long, because those beams, they are moving, So it means when you capture beams which are moving, they will give you more like a diffuse beam like that. I wanted sharp beams. So then I started to really shoot lots of different exposures during the light show. And then I selected a few of them and combined them all together to give you that. But that never happened at one point of time. There was when the laser were down, there was nothing going up like that. So again, it's a kind of alternate reality that I've been creating here. Here, vertical panorama really again helped the composition. This was shot handheld because I was outside, the balcony, and with my camera like that. So shooting with the 1424, unfortunately I was cropping that building here. So I didn't like to crop that building, given that I wanted a bit of sky here, but then it was cropping here. So I did one shot like that, slightly tilted my camera, do the bottom part, and also I really wanted to get those lines down. It really gives you like a sense of going down in the composition. So, and then I stitch that and get that final composition that you won't be able to get with any lens. This one is just to show you again the problem when you shoot at 1424 and wide angle. You have to, unless you want to have a lot of sky, which is absolutely a waste in the composition. So you will end up having those distortion here, which is okay, you know, in a way. But if you want no distortion, the tilt shift lens, you get the same view, but all the buildings completely straight like that. So a different perception of reality. Same here, another example of doing panorama with the tilt shift. Same here. And of course, I wanted to show you the shot that gave me the prize at the HIPAA contest. So this was shot with a fisheye, and the little story about that is that I was not planning to participate in the contest, you know, and a friend called me the day before the deadline and said, hey, it's tomorrow, you know. It was the time where it was still the 31st of December to submit your shot. And he told me, yeah, why, you know, why you don't submit anything? You know, it's free, and it's very easy. You just upload the shot. So I said, okay, you know, so I picked up that one. God knows why. And okay, so I was lucky to win. And I'm even more, I smile because when you look at, so there was the 5, I mean, when you look at all the shots, you know, so in the contest, you have 21 shots that are winners. So the first prize, and then 4 categories and 5 shots. So on those 21 shots for that HIPAA contest, my photo is the only shot where you don't see a human person or an animal. All the other shots had either people or like a wildlife. So mine is the only one that is really abstract and no human life in it. So it was a bit funny to see that. And to tell you that you have better chance to win at HIPAA if you put a human element in your photos. That's the lesson learned, I guess. Again, you know, looking down and taking advantage of reflection of the building. So it's a technique that whenever I'm on the rooftop, I try to see what's down and if there is any interesting reflection that I can capture. Also, sometimes, you know, Cityscape, don't always think ultra wide angle, but take your best or your big telelens and zoom in, and you will get those nice kind of abstract and compressed perspective, which I like very much. Also here, Hong Kong, long exposure. This was shot through the glass, so other challenges here. Have to wrap your lens with a black cloth to avoid, this is from the observation deck of the Sky 100 tower in Hong Kong, and lots of light inside, so very, very challenging to shoot. Singapore, you know, this is, luckily, you know, it all fitted in my 1424, and I didn't even have to do any correction, just looking straight gave that also nice long exposure with the clouds here. Another technique that I teach, which is the same technique that I use to combine the light beams that you saw before, is so to shoot fireworks now, I'm not using where, you know, I don't open my shutter like for 16 seconds and just wait for the burst to happen and then shut it down. I go for more like a short shutter speed, but I take a lot of them. And then I recombine them all together. So for that, what I did first, I shot the whole cityscape before the fireworks started. And then I did specific exposures without caring of the cityscape exposure. I was focused on getting proper fireworks shots. So then, this one, when this one happened, you know, maybe these fireworks were not there. So again, you can recreate your own fireworks show for that. Same as here, completely alteration of reality, because when the fireworks started here, this is shot from Wild Wadi. There was no light on Wild Wadi. So what I did is I took a shot when it was still there was still some lights here, and then the fireworks started maybe 2 or 3 hours later. So again, think first of, you know, of the final image, because I was not really excited to give a picture with this part completely black. You know, it was not very interesting. So even it's about cityscape, but I wanted to show you some nightscape I'm doing. Again, this one I was a bit lucky that there was a big lighting here, so it really lit the whole foreground here, and I was able still to capture the Milky Way during the 30-second exposure. Same kind of thing, but vertical panorama, which allows me to again capture a bit more of the foreground. So think vertical panorama like this one. When I was shooting, I was, you know, I wanted to get a bit of a foreground, and then I was cropping the Milky Way here, you know, and still there was a big part of the Milky Way that I wanted. So again, shooting straight, tilting my camera up, and then stitching to get that panorama here. This is a night shot during full moon in Iceland. It's a beautiful place. We'll be going there next month also. And it's also a panorama, but which I did with my 1424, so like maybe five different shots, single exposures, you know. Again, you know, Iceland, that's the place and the time now for the Northern Lights. So, very, you know, very easy to shoot when, especially it was moonlight. So I got the plane. It's a very famous plane wreckage in Iceland. So the moonlight was great to light the plane wreckage. We didn't have to light it up with a torch. So you can see very low ISO, 15 seconds. So Northern Lights is a very easy technical shoot also, a bit close to the Milky Way. Like this one, you know, low ISO, you know, and because again, thanks to the moonlight, you know, I was able to get those nice lit mountains and church. Also, sometimes, you know, good to have some human in the landscape shot. Multiple technique here again, yeah, focus stacking, because you can see the rock is pretty close to my camera here, and you have that mountain here. So I had to do like focus point here, and then I played a lot with my shutter speed because I didn't want like the long exposure, so where it would be all white here without any interesting textures. So you know, now when you do seascapes and there are waves, you just have to play with the shutter speed to be able to capture some interesting patterns here. So, you know, just it's a trial and error, you know.
This is where I lost my camera?
Yeah, that was that day where just here.
You were shooting and
So yeah, Danny had his tripod in the water, but it was a very calm water. But he was distracted by something, and then when he turned back, the camera was not here anymore. It was a dramatic day. And I'll show you here. Okay, that's another place where it's a lot of fun to shoot because it's fast-paced, and you know, you have to be very careful. I'll show you an incident that happened to me in Iceland. So here is more like fast shutter speed. Here you try to play with maybe more like 1 second. And this is even a little bit more to get those patterns here. This is a place also where we're going to go this time. A very nice ice cave, waterfall cave. Not so popular, so it's very nice to go there. There's not all with lots of tourists. This is one of my favorite shots from my last trip I did in July. Again, a canyon with an amazing, beautiful waterfall here, and using HDR here. And this is, yeah, what happened to me just a few days before actually it was the second day in Iceland. There's a big rock here, you know, where you can get some nice composition when the water comes in. And, you know, so, you know, I was like that, and I didn't see, you know, then the next second, I'm just falling on my back, And so I managed to keep my camera and tripod out of the water. But I was completely covered with water, you know. And, sorry? Yeah. Which? No, 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 no. No, I mean, maybe, yeah, if I had like an underwater housing would be great, but no, no, because, you know, I only use the kind of, when it's raining, I put some plastic around. You mean the plastic thing? Yeah, maybe next time I will do that. And, but, you know, so it was a bit intense, you know, and of course my camera received a splash, obviously. And I removed the battery, waited, come back to the hotel, put it near the heater. And then after 1 hour, I put the battery back, everything was running fine, you know. And then we went out to shoot that plane that you saw the plane with the Aurora. So I was more lucky than Danny for this one, but I could have been dragged back to the sea. I mean, it was really, it's very bad example, and I'll make sure, you know, this will never happen again. So I'm thinking now whether we should have a break, because then it's starting to get very technical, you know. So let's have a break. Yeah. Yeah, no, but the housing, it's more than expensive than the camera, you know. It's for the underwater. Yeah.
It's very nice. Keep the camera.
Yeah.
I know it's heavy.
Mm. Yeah, but I know it's very expensive. Hi.
Come all the way from Saudi to Delhi.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, 3 days. Yes, I'm going back tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Wow. You know, thanks for. Huh?
I'm actually all your friends did, but you don't know me. So.
I have 5,000 friends, so I'm sorry. I know a lot of people say, yeah. We talk on Facebook. Yeah, say, yeah, sure.
I purposely
Yeah, but the best view is from the penthouse, you know.
From the penthouse,
Yeah. It's a great view. I'll get some water. And there's been some, the budget has gone down because when I did my presentation last time, it was not a lot of food, drinks, everything.
Yeah,
Tighten up the
money.
When you have shot on the top of the building, what do you prefer? How to go to get permission? But access is I was shooting for a customer owning the building.
This is off, right?
Yeah.
They will hear.
You cannot hear on the back?
I said now, only what you speak will be there.
Yeah.
Will be here. Haven't you seen that video of
anything there for free.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Anything there for free.
You know, any food is horribly expensive. Okay, now we'll get more into the technical part, but still very general. So this is not really what's in my bag, because my bag wouldn't be able to handle too much, but mostly my D810, of course, hopefully soon to become a D850. Then, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of that Nikon 19mm tilt shift. But next month I'm going to Iceland, so I will probably carrying the wide angle and the 19, and probably the 70-200. I found myself, I was in Iceland in July, and sometime in some landscape situation, sometimes wide angle is too wide. So you want to get close to some part, like maybe like if you would go to the desert in Liwa, wide angle would be too much, because then you won't even see the details of the dune. So like a typical case, Liwa desert, you need also like a 70-200 to get some nice dune details. And I would also, me and Danny, we've been giving a lot of workshops, and we see when we did the rooftop one, and we see people, coming with nice cameras and a very cheap tripod, unfortunately, and this will ruin your experience. You have to invest in a very good tripod to avoid any frustration when you shoot, landscape or cityscape on location. Okay, so I will come to that tripod. Of course, also the bag is important, so I will also present the bag that I'm using. So this is very important. So okay, I'll do a little bit advertisement for the brand, which I'm ambassador, but I've been using it for over 6 or 7 months now, and it's a great tripod. So it's a carbon fiber. It folds in a way also that is very compact, because all those legs can completely go on the other side. It has a leveling base. It's not very important. It's mandatory when you want to do a panorama. When you have to make sure your camera rotates and stays at the same level. Especially sometimes you could level the whole tripod, but it's very difficult. You have to adjust because sometimes the terrain is not flat, so the legs have to be adjusted. So when you have the leveling base, you don't even care how your tripod is level. So you just put your tripod down, you do your leveling. There's an extra bubble level that makes sure that you're level. And then regarding the head, the benefits which I like on this head is a few features. It has something called a tilt lock. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of vertical panorama. So when you do your tilting up, you have to make sure it doesn't go this way or this way. So this tripod will lock the tilting to make sure you are tilting the proper way. And it has something, you can see the marking here, which is in degrees. So when you do a panorama, you have to rotate also a certain degree to have a correct overlap between all the different shots. So this one has something called a 15 stop click. So it clicks every 15 degrees. And luckily for me, I calculated, it doesn't have to be super precise, but for my 19mm, if I want to do a panorama correctly, I need 30 degrees between each rotation. So I just have to hear 2 clicks. Click, click, I take a shot. Click, click, I take a shot. I don't even have to. Otherwise, you have to visualize, your overlap. So sometimes it's difficult, it's very dark. So seeing how you overlap between 2 shots, the fact of having these clicks saves me a lot of time. And yeah, so again, it goes in a very compact form that you can put in your luggage. When I travel, I never carry, usually they would not let you take the tripod inside the plane. You know, maybe they think it's some kind of weapon. So I always check in my check-in luggage, but then it means you need a compact tripod for that. Filters. So like Danny here and I, we are both ambassadors for NiSi filters. And you know, the reason we also accepted to be ambassadors is that we really trust in the quality of those filters. So they have a very neutral. The problem with when you use neutral density filters, some of them have create a color cast, what we call a color cast. So I will not mention, you know, but there is a famous brand where you use these filters, it would give you like a blue color cast. So which of course you can correct in by adjusting the white balance, but the less you have to do those things, the better it is. So very nice. I mean, no color cast. They also they just launched. I mean, it's not available yet, but I've been doing the unboxing this weekend. It's a new filter holder called the S5, which what I like, it's very innovative because, you know, most of those big filter holders, you have 2 slots to put your filter. So you can stack 2 filters. So let's say I want to stack a polarizer and then an ND filter. So then I'm done. And the problem is when you, the polarizer has to be polarized. So it means you have to rotate the whole filter and look into the live view or the viewfinder to see the effect, you know. So say sometimes you want to remove the reflection on the surface of the water. So you have to rotate the polarizer lens until you don't see reflections anymore. Then you mean you find the proper angle. This is okay. And let's say if you want to stack just a normal ND filter. So it's all it's all uniform. So whether you rotate the polarizer, it doesn't affect anything. But this becomes a bit tricky when you want to use a polarizer and something called ND grad, you know, filter. So this filter is like, it's a graduated going from dark to clear, you know. So this is when you want to shoot like you get a proper exposure of the sky as opposed to the foreground. Because the problem is if you're not using, like me, you know, digital blending or mixing exposure, if you want to do it old school and do it in one shot, you can never get a proper sky exposed and a foreground. You have to use this ND grad. So mostly in situation where like you have a horizon. So you have to adjust, but you can see that your filter has to be completely vertical. So if you put a polarizer and then you start rotating to get the proper rotation, you cannot use the ND grad. So they came with a great new concept where the polarizer is separated and it's inside the holder. So you can, it's like a big round polarizer. And then you have the first layer is the polarizer, and then you have 2 slots to put the square filter. So you can adjust your polarizing angle like that, and then you can put your square filters, or the ND are not square but more rectangular. So it means you can stack 3 filters. So a polarizer, which is by default, and I've just heard that they will also provide a round filter, but not only polarizer but ND, so which is great. And I was mentioning that I'm using, I mean, I showed you before the presentation, the natural night filter, which I really love the effect on night photography. Bag. So Danny and I, we are both using, Danny has a bigger bag, so I'm using it's a great brand. The benefit of this bag, it's really a bag for landscape photographers, meaning you can, of course, carry your photographic equipment, which is located in something called internal camera unit, ICU. Of course, it has a cover here, you know, with a zipper. So the cover is hidden there. But it becomes like an independent bag that you can carry with a handle. And you extract it from the bag, which has the opening on the back side. So depending on your equipment, you can choose different size of the ICU. So if you are not, you know, carrying too many lenses, so you can choose a medium-sized ICU, put your lenses and camera, and whatever is left here, like if you're hiking, or you can put food, you can put, spikes for the walking on the ice. You can put a lot of stuff, because usually if you use a camera bag, you can only put the camera in there. You cannot put anything else. Even though you cannot even put clothes, warm clothes in there. So this bag it's like a hiking bag with a separate camera unit here. And the other benefit of it is like when you check, sometimes, you know, you want to check your bag at, you know, you want to go in the plane with the whole bag, and they will say, no, it's too big. You know, sometimes it's not a question of weight, it's a question of volume. Even if you're not going over the weight, they will stop you because, yeah, it's too high, it's too big. So what you can do is you remove your very precious, expensive equipment on that ICU, and you check that bag. So you take that to the plane. So it's a really good concept, especially Emirates. They are really now very tight on that, you know, unless you, of course, you fly business, but it's not the case. You can go to the Terminal 3. You will have, before you check on the immigration, there's a guy there with a scale or something. You will get stopped. And one day that's what happened. I was going to India for a workshop, and I had to leave my whole bag and all the cameras. So what I did is I wrapped it up with this plastic, so it kind of make it a bit more difficult to be open and the installed thing in it. So great concept. Yeah. Well, if we double the price of our workshop, maybe we can fly business.
My wife, she will not agree.
Yeah. So in terms of post-processing, everything is done through Photoshop. Again, it might be strange, but I don't even have Lightroom on my computer. So Camera Raw for the converting the raw files, digital blending using layer mask or luminosity mask, and the lens correction, perspective warp, and the Panorama. But again, sometimes Panorama in Photoshop doesn't work. So, and in terms of plugins for Photoshop, so the whole Nik Collection, but from which I use mostly those three, Nik Color FX Pro, Nik Silver FX Pro, and Nik Define to remove noise if needed. And the HDR software, the only one that I strongly recommend is this Oloneo Photo Engine, but it only works on Windows. And the Panorama software, AutoPano, that's the best Panorama software I've used so far. And I've tried Photoshop, I've tried PTG UI, I've tried Panorama Factory. So after a long quest, I found the best one here. Camera settings, again, it's, I guess, all common sense here for you, who already doing photography as a big hobby. I don't use too many features of the camera. Auto white balance, matrix mode for the metering, good tripod and ball head, remote, and optimal aperture. And so I have been in situation where, I didn't have the filter or the filter were too far, or I left them at home. So I will start using f22 to get long exposure, also reducing the ISO. Nikon, the base ISO, the D810, the base ISO is 64, but you can go down to 32, I think. So this gives you a way to extend your exposure. But in those cases anyway, you know, I would use f22 only for the water or the sky. You know, all the rest of my picture would still be shot at f8. So again, I'm not applying f22 on the whole picture. Again, these are the reason, you know, why you should shoot in RAW exclusively and completely forget about JPEG. So of course, much more bits for the colors, you know, JPEG 8 bits, 14 bits for RAW. Absolutely no loss of quality. JPEG, you know, already compressed. You lose quality from the moment you write the JPEG file on the memory card. It's already compressed and lost quality. Higher dynamic range, you know, you can even, I will show you some photos that really looks like they are ruined because they are completely dark. Because I shot them in RAW, I can recover everything. White balance can be modified, very important. But, you know, it has some inconvenience, big files, 70 megabytes. There is a compressed RAW format without any loss of quality, which can bring that down to 40 megabytes. And, you know, it doesn't really look good, you know, on the image viewer. It doesn't look sharp. And, of course, you need to develop it first. So look at that one, you know. It's, I use an ND64 filter, which is 6-stop. Obviously, I got my exposure time completely wrong. So I end up going home with that on my memory card, you know. So I said, okay, you know, I will just delete it. But no, just in Camera Raw, just slide the shadows slider up. And this is really, I don't even do, and I just, to show you, I just put the exposure maybe and the shadow to a higher value, and I recovered all the underexposed shots, underexposed areas. So high dynamic range. This is a concept where, which is the core concept of my photography, is try to recapture a high dynamic range, because the sensor today of any of the best camera, which will give you a dynamic range between 19 to 14 stop. I will not go into the detail of what the stop means, but it's a measure to measure the amount of light that that come into your eyes or into your camera. So 24 stop for a human eye, and you know, 9 to 14 for a camera sensor. So this is why I was talking to you about taking multiple bracketed exposure. So if you take this range of exposure going from a very underexposed, the underexposed shot will give you all the details in the highlights. And then as you go to an overexposed shot, which will give you all the details in the shadows. And then comes how to create the HDR image. You have digital blending or HDR software. So for instance, this shot, this is the most challenging light condition you can get. You know, you are inside a cave, there is a strong light outside. It was maybe not the best time of the day to shoot, but you know, sometime when you do landscape, it takes 2 or 3 hours to go on the location. You get there, you know, you need to get a shot anyway. So problem with getting details in the shadows and completely burn. I mean, it's completely white here. So even with Camera Raw, I doubt that you can recover anything from that. That's a pure white color and nothing else. So by using multiple exposures and HDR, you know, you're able to get details in the shadows and completely remove the overexposed area over here. This is, okay, this sheet might be a little bit old because it doesn't have the D850 yet in there. So Nikon, the D810 has been on the top for quite a long time, and then came the Sony A7R2, which has a bigger sensor, and so I'm pretty sure 100% now that when DxOMark, it's an independent lab, they do very technical measures of analysis of the sensor, and they give a note. So I'm pretty sure the D850 will be on top over here. And you can see here it has 14. The Nikon has a 14.8. No, sorry. Well, you know, depend also. They do portrait, landscape, sport, so, and they give an average note after that. And sorry for, you can see there's obviously a brand missing here. I will not, you don't have to say names here. So, I mean, maybe it's my fault. I should put maybe 20 cameras here in the list so you can see some other photographer's favorite brand here. So no, I'm not a bad person. So I really took what could fit on that slide. Yeah, sorry, Lal, but maybe you know, they will come with. I heard they will come with a. Was huge, like 60 or 70 megapixel. Yeah. So HDR, you know, as I mentioned, two techniques: HDR software, digital blending, and digital blending, which my favorite method. So very manual process that I will show in Photoshop. Luminosity mask something, or you can combine both. You know, anything is possible. So. In a night photography situation, so again, my philosophy of post-processing is to really do the minimum. You know, I don't want to. It's not my pleasure to spend hours in front of my computer and to get something. You know, keep it simple. So when I take a shot, I just look. I locate the areas which needs to be fixed and nothing else. You know. So areas that might look overexposed or underexposed. And then I said, okay, now I have 5 shots there. I will bring whatever I need. So to recover that underexposed shot, obviously I need to use an overexposed shot. So this is the final result of the blending. So you can see I managed to recover details on the building here. Here, you know, it was completely white. Now you see like the swimming pool, and you can see that these are trees. You know, it's just not like a black matter here. And correcting a bit of the exposure over there. And of course, using Nik Color Effect software to give a bit of boost in the colors and contrast. Bracketing is just a technique in the camera to get multiple shots. So what you do after that, you can use HDR software. You can use digital blending. But, and you have some cameras that do in-camera HDR, but I never use that. So just to give you an example, before, after, you know. And then the same comparison, blended using Photomatics, which is a very popular HDR software. Okay, I'm not very fair, sorry. It's not very fair of doing this comparison because this one is also after Nik Color Effects processing. This one is just out of the HDR software without any post-production. So I'm not fair with Photomatics, but still, you know, you can see there is some color cost to correct, you know, and it might not control the highlights as good as doing it manually. You know, there's still some burnout areas here.
So even if anyone
Yeah. Yeah. No, the thing is, since I'm shooting with the D810, I don't need to use too many exposures. So sometimes I need just to use 2. If you're using a camera with less dynamic range, you might have to use a bit more, which I was doing when I was shooting with the D300. I had to really use a lot more exposures to blend. now maybe I can get away with one single exposure most of the time. Unless you have like a huge bright area and even you try to reduce the highlights, it doesn't fix it. So when you should use HDR software versus digital blending? Yeah, you have some condition where doing this manual thing, it's very tricky, especially if you shoot landscape during, let's say, a daylight, where, you know, unless I show it to you, you will not understand what I'm talking about, but it's very difficult to use the blending when you have to paint on some areas, and you end up having what we call halos that will appear. So that's why when still now I'm doing a landscape shot, let's say at sunset, I will use a combination of HDR software and digital blending. And of course, digital blending, what you're doing is you are not putting all your exposure into some software which has its own algorithm and output an image that you might not have complete control of it. Digital blending gives you complete control. You decide exactly which areas you want to brighten or darken. And also, as you saw before, I'm mixing like the typical fountain shot, which has to be shot at very high shutter speed, high ISO, and the Cityscape shot, which is shot as a long exposure. The HDR software would have no clue how to combine that. This is only a manual method. For here, for instance. So this is the final shot, vertical panorama with a tilt shift. So the building was shot at ISO 100, f8, and I only needed 2 exposures here, 8 seconds and 30 seconds. And were blended in digital blending. And the fountains were shot at ISO 3200. This is the widest aperture I can use on that lens. And so at very high shutter speed. So if you look at the different shots, so this is the 30-second shot exposure. I didn't put the 8. The 8 shot is to darken. You know, this is too bright here because that's the camera is struggling, you know. If you want to get details here, you have to expose for 30 seconds. But when you expose to 30 seconds, all the lights on the back get completely blown up. So you need to get an 8-second shot to fix that, you know, as you can see here. And then look at the fountain shots. Okay, I got the exposure right for the fountain, but it's completely darkened here. So if I wanted to do that in one exposure, yeah, I can shoot one shot at ISO 3200 and then increase the shadows setting, but then you will get lots of noise, believe me. Especially, you know, you get a lot of color noise all around, so it would look really bad, especially in high resolution. Perspective issues when you're shooting with ultra wide angle, UWA. So these are 2 shots, vertical panorama again, with 19 mm, shifting up, you know, because I want a bit of sky, and shifting down, I want a bit of the foreground here. So when I blend those, and blending and do the stitching, here's my final shot here. But there are some issues. You know, it looks a bit weird. First, look at that part here. This is like falling down. You know, that should be straight. And the boats here, it's also like there is a slope. So maybe for a non-trained eye, it would be okay. But for me, there is some skewing, what we call, you know. So there is a nice tool in Photoshop called Perspective Warp. Where you have to create a mesh with the control points, and then you have to start pulling those. So you can see now, I've managed to pull out that to good version. Here, okay, I tried my best here, but I could not do better than that, you know. So, so here's the final shot, so which looks less disturbing with that part, and this one, I guess I can get away with it. So you can use that same technique in landscape. The problem is when you shoot landscape with an ultra-wide angle and there is a foreground, because you want to shoot a landscape with a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. So since you have not been on the location, you would not know, but believe me, the mountains are much bigger than they look here. So it's a bit frustrating when you do landscape with ultra-wide angle, that the background always look very small. So you can use that perspective warp tool again to give a more realistic size to the mountain in the background. You can also use the scale tool, but in some case where, let's say, there was another mountain here, you didn't want to make that mountain look, to increase the height for all the mountains. This is where perspective warp makes you isolate a part of the picture, and you can only warp that part. Another situation where, you know, took a fog shot from the index tower, so could just be happy with that, but this is one, it was the first time I was experimenting long exposure for the fog. So I put my, at that time I was not using a glass filter, but it was a resin filter. The benefit of resin filter that they are very light and they are unbreakable, but they have some color cost. And also they can get scratched much easier than glass. So I had a color cost issue here, and also it kind of blew up my sky, and I lost the flare on the tower, and I got some strange color. So what I did simply is I will combine the fog here with the buildings here, you know, and you get something kind of best of both worlds here. The Kuala Lumpur shot. So, you know, that if I only had one shot to do, that would be my only option. So I had to tilt up the camera, and you get that, you get that distortion, which is very easy to fix in Photoshop. But, you know, when I saw that reflection, I said, okay, you know, I cannot miss that one. So one shot tilting up, one shot looking straight, one shot looking down. And look at these are single exposures here. These are not of course, I took 5 shots here, 5 shots here, 5 shots here. So you can see the challenge already. The camera here was exposing for the tower, so everything else is dark. And here it was exposing for the trees and the park, and the tower is completely blown up. So it's very difficult to do that in single exposures, or you can try to in camera raw. So then doing the blending of the top, middle, bottom, and then doing the stitching, you get a shot really that everything is perfectly exposed. There's no dark areas or blown areas anywhere, you know, because even here you cannot even read the time here, and then you can get it here. Even for that, I blended a very dark shot just to get the digits of the clock here. The one that was shot in this vicinity. So again, long exposure for the sky. What happens here? Completely blown off because all the traffic coming up. So impossible to get it in one shot. So then I did those different exposures to get, like, you know, proper exposure for those areas here. Then again for the cars, etc. Long exposure for the light trails. So this was okay. Looking up, looking straight, and then getting more, you know, light trails, and combining everything, you know, to get everything properly exposed. The other shot that I mentioned to you, you know, 14 mm, I'm not even able to fit the whole tower in the frame. So, you know, what can you do then? Only way, vertical panorama. So up, middle, down, and one shot for the fountain here. And as you can see, you know, maybe I waited like 20 minutes before the fountain show started, so it was completely dark. And this was shot at the blue hour. And final result here. And again, same technique here. The two shots for the, actually, you know, I could use only this one. I'm sure in camera raw I can fix that part here. But for the sake of the exercise, I took a darker one. So that's for at normal ISO. Then high ISO, 1 second shutter speed, and high ISO, fast shutter speed to get the fountain. And also note that here you can see the fisheye distortion. So the Burj Khalifa is really banded, and even more this one. Everything straightened up here. So of course, you know, that's inevitable here. In reality, this is a straight building, but because of the fisheye, you get that. But at least the buildings are straight, and I guess that, okay, you know, there's nothing much you can do here. So another technique which I use also of thinking multiple exposures when doing landscape photography. So this was a shot in Oregon on the west coast of the States. So I did my 7 brackets. For me, that was my background layer, shall I say, where I wanted the sky to be correctly exposed and the landscape. Because what you can't see here, yeah, it's a place where the water rushes in, you know, at a regular interval. But you can see that you can capture all different kind of shapes and textures. But then, you know, when I shot those photos, I didn't even care about what's going on in the sky. I have my shot here with a proper sky. So what you do is I created an HDR which has nothing interesting as far as the water is concerned. And then I went through all my different shots. Then, you know, let's say you can relax. You know, you got your proper sky here. Then you can focus on the other part of the photo, which is the foreground. So you can experiment, take your time, even if the sun has completely gone, you know, you still have something going on here. So you can experiment different shutter speed, put a filter if you want, and put a filter, and again, you don't care what's going on in the sky. And then back home, you combine all of those to give you this, you know. So that is part of the first set of shots which had nothing going on in the foreground. And this is, okay, I selected this one because you get some nice textures, flow here. But I can create 4 different shots here, you know, with the same sky, of course, but with a different foreground here. So this is my approach also for landscape photography, kind of see it as a combination of different things. Yeah, the foreground is a single picture. No, the foreground is a single picture. Because, yeah, no, if I start mixing multiple shots, it would look a bit messy here. So, but what I say is like once you got that part fixed, then you can focus by adjusting, playing with your aperture, shutter speed, ISO, whatever, without caring of that part. So these are, again, landscape, Vertorama long exposure. So you can see here, these are like, I shot with a 10-stop filter, and obviously I got my my exposure wrong because it looks really dark. And also what I did is I didn't want to look like the typical long exposure where the water is misty from foreground to background. I said I want something more interesting in the foreground. So I did that shot. So here, sorry, this is my looking, you know, I wanted to get really the big sky here, so I took the shot. Actually, I was looking straight for that. But, you know, I knew I was cropping that rock here. So I tilted down my camera and to capture more of the foreground. So these 3 shots here, I will show, I have it on my computer, so I will demonstrate right away. So then I wanted to have something a bit different than having all the misty water all around here. So, and also a lot of sky, and I got my square composition here, and a bit more a different foreground. And people with a trainer would know that it's impossible to have long exposure here and kind of fast exposure here. So obviously it's again an alternate reality here. So these are the complex panorama that I did. So starting from left, rotating, you know, my 30 degrees, shifting down, again starting from left. These are the middle exposures. So you can see there's some issues of overexposure here. So now I'm doing the blending. So you can see also this is too bright. So I'm blending, I'm doing the different blending here, correcting this, 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 and this.
Why did you do it after you stitched it?
Sorry?
Why didn't you do it after you stitched it together?
No, I cannot. I mean, I cannot elaborate here, but there is a specific order to get something. So now I have all my blended shots. So what I did now, I tried to feed that into AutoPano, and I say stitch that. It didn't work. You know, it did stitch, but there was completely lot of stitching errors everywhere. You know, it was not working. So what I had to do is stitch that part first. That you can see here, like because of its warping. You know, you get some anti-pixel, and then I had to stitch the bottom. So two-stage stitching, the top and the bottom, and then stitching both, and of course applying Nik color effects to give the colors here. Okay, then another example of alternate reality. Yeah, we still have time. So this one, it's a shot I did in Oregon also. It's a very famous lake, beautiful lake called Lake Trillium, with a beautiful view on a mountain called Mount Hood, which used to be a volcano. So to tell you, I took 200 shots. I mean, remind that when I say I take 200 shots divided by 5 or 7, let's say so because every time I bracket. And on those 200 shots, I selected 10. And it's a combination of HDR, meaning I use the HDR software, and digital blending. And it took me a little bit of a while to do that. That panorama before also, it took me 2 hours to do it. So that's the shot, the final shot, you know. Of course, none of this is real, to be honest with you. I mean, at least it never happened at the same time. You know, the dock was there at some time, the sun was here at some time, the fog was here at some time, the reflection were there at some time. So here I go. So I arrive on the location, set my tripod, my composition, and suddenly, you know, it was before sunrise, so nothing, no light, nothing. But I see a duck coming in the frame, so I say, okay, I take the duck. You know, never know, might use it later. Then I wait for the sun to rise. So okay, now that's getting the proper light. You know, sun's coming right here. Nice reflection, bit of fog. So I started to bracket. You know, you know, I don't care of if I film. I mean, I have a big memory card, so don't be, don't think, yeah, you just take this shot. Just bracket. Even if sometimes it's the same shot, you never know because light can change, something can happen. So I really started to bracket my exposures. And I knew that at one point the sun would come out behind the trees here. So already in my head I said, okay, sun coming behind trees, flare, stars, typical. But to get the star, you cannot shoot at f8. It would not be nice. Maybe this one I went the big way, f22. So I waited. Look what happened. I got my beautiful sun flare here. But what happened here? I lost everything, you know, the reflection, the fog, all gone. Maybe because some boat just went there and disrupted everything. Huh? Yeah. So you see where my frustration, you know, I cannot use that shot for the sun flare. I got anything. And then I was still not happy with the foreground, you know, no light. So I knew that the sun eventually would come up. So you can see here, because the sun now has raised a little bit, the sun flare is gone. But I got light on the foreground. But again, there's the reflection are gone, everything. So this is the Photoshop workspace where you can see the different exposures here and something called layer masking here. So first, step by step. So this is my bracketed shot, 7 shots. So from -3 stop to +3. Then combine in HDR, because, you know, this is where it's going to get tricky, you know. If I want to combine it manually and get that nice sky here, so I have to combine that sky with those trees, meaning those who are familiar with layer masking, I will get, you know, when I will get lots of halos around here. So I give up on maybe with using luminosity mask I can get away, but HDR software, it does it in 35 seconds. Okay? Why when I'm going to create 18 luminosity mask and choose this one, blah blah blah. But again, you know, it's Oloneo Photo Engine. I cannot vouch for other HDR software. So I got my HDR, which is a bit not very interesting yet. So I did some exposure correction, you know, manually, you know, by blending shots from a single shot. So to get more of the fog here, I added the light of the shot with where the lights are on the rocks, the sun flare, the duck, and then the post-processing here. So if I came back home with all my 200 exposures and say, okay, I need to choose one, I have nothing to choose. I can choose something, but, you know, I would not have the duck. I would have to choose, okay, nice sun flare but no reflection on the water, or a nice reflection and no sun flare. So, you know, this is my concept of, let's say, when you cannot get what you want in a single exposure. Same for that one. It's another place very popular in the south of Oregon. It's a seascape place. It's called Thor's Well. It's a big hole in the rock, and the water's coming, and it rejects the water very dramatically. So this one was very stressing to shoot because you don't have much time again to think bracketing because it's too fast, you know. You have to just get as many shots as you want, hoping that one will be good. But again, I was not able to get one shot properly, and I'll show you why. So the big thing also that I was getting here, I was shooting against, the sun was in front of me. So the 1424 has a huge glass part in front, and the thing is you have lots of flare. You know, these are like those green or red strikes that appears on the corner of the picture. So there is a trick to get rid of them. And also every time the sea came, I got my lens misty, and then I had to clean it very quickly and then start shooting again. And also make sure you save the camera. So that's the final shot here. So I'll show you the different shot that I use. So this one, okay, not very, nothing's going on here, but I got my sky that I want for the final shot. Maybe the sun, I think, was still a little bit overexposed, so I got this one with the sun, which has a better definition of the disk. And then, okay, you can see here on that shot, sky is completely blown up. And at that time, I was not even thinking bracketing because there's no time, you know, for bracketing. So at that time, I mean, if I had an ND grad filter here, it would have helped me a lot. But luckily, you know, you have Photoshop and digital blending and multiple exposure. But for this one, I like the wave crashing here, but still nothing is going on. And you see a little bit, this is a typical flare. Sometimes they will be more like huge around here. So you cannot see the hole, and very dull foreground here. But nice part here. Here, okay, yeah, good. I like that. But still, there's still too much water in the hole. And I lost my wave here. And again, some flare. This one, okay, finally, I got my clear definition of the hole. Still, that is fine, but again, no waves, and of course, the sky is too bright. And this is how you remove the flare, you know. I mean, you don't have to use your hand, but you can use your thumb, so you have to put it against the sun. I mean, you have to look in the viewfinder, locate where the sun is, put your thumb, and you will see the flare going away here. So different shots, yeah, typically that's the flare, and you have some flare here too. So the Photoshop with the different layers and the different exposures, including one where you see my hand, but they don't appear in the final shot because I'm only masking the small part. So we start with the first shot. I'm adding the wave. I'm adding the sun to a smaller definition, correcting the exposure. That's another flare here, and a big flare here, but they will be gone as we go. Adding my foreground, adding the hole here. And okay, you know, since it's water, it kind of blends, you know. There is no like stitching problem that appears, you know. There are so many, it's all about texture, so you can get away with a lot of things. And here again, I'm getting a bit more exposure on the rocks, a little bit of flare here, getting rid of that. And there's a bit, it was not straight, so correcting the horizon. So of course, this flare I was not able to get rid of, but you know, I think it gives some realism also to the fact that you're shooting against the sun. So I guess this is time for a Photoshop demo now. Okay, so I will start with the Burj Khalifa shot. So here are the different exposures. I will load only the raw file. These are like already processed. So this, and this. Okay, I have my all my shots loaded in Camera Raw. The adjustments have already been done. You know, you can see here. This one, I reduced the highlights a little bit. You know, there was not too much. This one, again, I reduced the highlights. This one, again, reducing the highlights. I always increase a bit the clarity and the vibrance here. This one, of course, also this is the shot to fix that foreground. You can see here, you know, this is really too bright. So I will blend, this shot, which is darker here. And this is the shot for the fountain at, you know, ISO 2500. Of course, you know, if I look at the original shot, it's really dark, you know, so I increase a bit the exposure here and the shadows. So I will open all the images. Okay. So this is my middle shot. So this is my best exposed shot for the middle. The only thing I have to take care of is this area here. It's really too bright, you know, and maybe some places. But this is one single exposure. It's almost correct, except that part here. So what I do here, I select this one, and I paste it here on top of the other one. So I do something called layer masking here. So I add a mask, and I fill it with black. Sorry, but I cannot really go into every single detail, so that's why we do those 4 hours workshop to teach you how to do that. So I'm using something called a brush, and let me check here my opacity and flow here. Okay, so what I'll do now, I'll just paint a little bit here to reduce the exposure. So you can see here, not too much, you know. It's up, you choose, you know, if you think it's really too bright, then you just paint more here. I paint a little bit here, maybe a little bit here, a little bit here, over there. And there's nowhere else, you know, where I feel there's a strong, maybe, you know, a little bit, okay? Yeah, so you can see here the adjustment here. So I have that shot, so I'll just flatten the image. So this is my middle shot. Then I have this one. The top shot, I only have one exposure because there's nothing that needs to be fixed. So the only one that needs to be fixed is the bottom one. So again, same thing. I select this image, paste it here, add a mask, and then, okay, you know, I think I'll really go a bit low on my flow here. So usually I do that with a tablet at home, so but the mouse is okay also. I've been using the mouse for many years before I moved to a tablet. So I'm just painting on areas where I feel, might be a little bit too bright. Okay. Then flatten the image. So this is my shot for the fountains, which I want to include. So obviously I have to include it here. So I will go paste it here. So they are obviously not aligned, There's a little bit misalignment. But the fountains are just in the middle here. But I can do I will do it. I will align those two layers. So you can see now it has now those two layers are aligned. Then to blend here, I don't use a mask. I use something called blending mode, lighten. So it's all blended now, And okay, since there has been some blank pixel, I will remove that. Crop it. So this is my final shot of the middle with the fountain. So now what I have to do is the top, which is one, okay? I will, now I'll do the stitching. So there is, again, I cannot elaborate, but there is a specific order to that you have to stack the layers to do the vertical panorama. So this is my bottom. Select, copy, and so I have stacked my 3 shots, which I'm going to now stitch using a function in Photoshop called auto align layers. So you can see it's still some problem, of the different brightness of the sky. That's why you have another function called auto blend here. Actually, something has happened which I could not control. The fountains somehow are gone because Photoshop decided to, use it from. So what? Now I remember I have to do include the fountain after. So it's okay, So I'll first, of course, you have to crop. Okay. Then I can go to the fountain. Paste. And then lighten. So, this is something I forgot, what's the order, but you can see that sometimes it's not really predictable, because, since you're putting different things that overlap, Photoshop would decide, okay, I exclude this one because I don't know, for whatever reason. So, and then of course from that, you go to Nik Color Effects to finalize the thing. So I'll move to the next one. Okay, first I will delete those files because they are the one that I want to show you that I'm opening the real raw file without adjustment. So this is the Cityscape shot I was telling you about. So really out of the camera, so pretty dark, you know, right? It's like everything is ruined, but okay, I'll just correct the highlights here on the sky and increase the shadows. And a little bit of exposure, not too much. Maybe first I will do the lens correction here. So already we'll also remove the vignetting. So I've recovered quite a lot in terms of the exposure here on the foreground. And you know, I like to, again, to put a bit of clarity and vibrance here. And not much. You know, you have sometimes this dehaze that can also give you a nice contrast in the sky. But okay, there's no haze here, so no need to do that. So open the image. So that's the top part. The bottom one was this one. Again, you know, no highlights to fix, but shadows, bit of exposure. And lens correction. Okay. So first I will blend those two. I mean, I don't, sorry, stitch. So of course, you know, it will have to distort to align the top and the bottom, but that's fine. So now I'll do the auto blend part because, you know, you can see there's some blending issues here. Okay, so I will flatten, and before I crop, I will open the one with the different texture, you know, for the water. So this one, of course, I have to, I have a white balance problem here, so I have to really make it, you know, usually I would do it a bit more carefully, you know, for the color matching, but obviously I have to reduce the color temperature of the water to make it look a bit more blue, and also that the exposure is a bit too bright. So, but okay, you know, the idea is not really to be perfect here, huh? And that. Shadows, a little more exposure. okay, you know, I will. Okay, is our line. So here, you know, I use a very quick trick called a gradient mask. So something like that. You choose where you want. So here, you know, I've mixed the foreground and of the faster shutter speed and the long exposure on the background. And I just have now to crop it. And then Nik Collection, Color FX Pro. So for that situation, skylight filter, you know, give a bit more warm color to the sky and the overall photo. So I like to use that. Maybe I'll increase a little bit more. So skylight filter. Since the sky is still a bit too bright for me, I can use, first I will use also a function that I like very much in Nik Color FX called Pro Contrast. So I will use that. And then I will apply a kind of a graduated neutral density filter on the sky, you know. And then Nik Collection FX Pro 4. So Pro Contrast, a bit of correct contrast, and dynamic contrast really give a nice texture to the sky also. Let's see now. Yeah. Then actually I could have done all in one filter, but I want you to show you each step of it. So now I will do two filters here. So the first, the graduated neutral density here. So kind of darken the sky a little bit better. Maybe I'll just use not too much, like that. And I will add a bit of more colors with the brilliance warmth here. Okay. So it applies now 2 filters, the one that darken the sky and one that give a bit more saturation to the colors. Okay, so that's it. This is so if we go back to the presentation, I guess we have this now. Yeah. Maybe someone can.
Hi, Daniel.
Hey,
nice presentation. Thanks for that.
problem.
See, you take a lot of shots.
You mean when I'm on location?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you taken 200 shots for one picture.
It can happen, yeah.
What is your archiving ideas? How you store your images? What is your like storage? How you store it and how you get it back, the images, whenever you want?
You mean my storage?
Yes.
So I use, so I have on my, I use a desktop at home. So I have already maybe like on my desktop, I probably have like 10 terabyte, of hard disk. But for the backup, I use a network attached storage. It's called NAS. So this one has, of course, it's a redundancy system called RAID. So I have a system with 4 drives. So each drive is 4 terabytes. So, but because of the redundancy, I mean, I can have one failure at a time. So one drive just dies. I take it out. I put a new drive. It rebuilds the whole thing. But it means I have more like 12 terabyte online because there was some space that is required to do this redundancy. So ideally, I would like to move to a 5 bay, meaning I have 5 drives, or now you can have 6 or even 8 terabytes. So then it means that you can have 2 drives that, the thing is, it's unlikely that you will have 2 drives that will die at the same time. But actually it happened, it didn't happen that way, but I have a drive that died, so I took it out, I put a brand new one, and suddenly it was total panic. I have one drive, another drive was saying that there was a crash on the other drive. But I let the whole thing go. It took almost 2 days to get everything back, but actually it was not a fatal crash on the other drive. So that's why I don't, the problem with the NAS is to access, you access it through a LAN cable, but it's not fast enough, so that's why it's more like a storage, a backup unit. And I still have my 10 terabyte. I mean, like it's spread on like three drives, like 3 and 4 terabyte. Yeah, and I'm thinking now of having a cloud backup. You have providers that provide you unlimited storage. You have to find them because most of them, some they will tell you, okay, it's 1 terabyte per year, and it's like $50, whatever. You have some for $50, you can get unlimited per year. So, but I think the first part would be very, I don't know, because I don't have a very high uplink on my internet. It's a basic plan, so like 4 megabit. It might take, I don't know, I need to calculate if I want to back up like, I think today the occupation on my NAS is around 8 terabyte. So how long it will take to upload 8 terabyte to the provider using 4 megabit per second, and meaning the latency also between the fact that it's somewhere maybe in the US, so you're not getting 4 megabit uplink, you're getting something even lower. But it's a concern. I mean, I have you know Benno Saradzic. So he's dealing with more like terabytes of data as he's doing time-lapse. So you can multiply the volume by 10 or more. But he has the same NAS, but huge thing. I don't know how many drive he has. But at the end, the ultimate backup is tape. It's guaranteed 30 years. So if the ultimate backup, it's tape. You cannot rely on anything. Forget CD or DVD. And drives, well, they fail, you know. So
you can store images. How you recover the images? Like how you catalog it? How do you know like the images?
I don't know. I have a very old school file structure, you know, like the year, and then by country or by whatever, and then I put it by location and then by day, you know. So I know it's not the ideal. Sometimes I really struggle to find. So a customer say, I want to buy this photo. Yeah, so luckily I have by looking simply at the year, I can go, and a location I know, you know. So I just have the year location. Yeah. No, I have, let's say I shot so many times from Cayenne Tower. So I have a folder Cayenne, and I have dates for each of them. Like I shoot on this date, I shoot on this date, I shoot on this date. So when I look at the tag of the photo, which has the exact date, I know where to go to get the file. Yeah, Aisan?
Thanks, Danny. I shoot primarily with the fisheye, and
yes.
I'm trying to capture, obviously, as wide as an area as I possibly can, but I get a lot of distortion.
Yeah.
I adjust the distortion, but I think
what
I saw today.
Yeah, so I'll send you the name of the company that provides, but you need to use Photoshop.
I've been using Lightroom.
I'm not sure if this plugin works on Lightroom. So.
Okay.
But I'll give you the website.
Adobe.
But forget all the whatever is in Lightroom or Photoshop. They have their own fisheye correction. It's crap, you know. So, yeah. You lost a lot of pixel, and it distorts very badly. This one is the best fisheye distortion.
I also think I was stacking it wrong, or stitching them wrong, based on what I saw you do today.
Stitching with fisheye, it's a bit tricky, you know, because of the distortion. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hey,
where do you see photography in the next 5 or 10 years, technology-wise? These days, we see even mobile phones are doing a good job somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell, you know, I'm using, okay, not to name it, a Huawei P10, and which has a night photography mode. And basically what it's doing what I'm doing. It's taking multiple exposures and combining them inside the camera. And believe me, the quality of the night shots are quite impressive.
Yeah, I feel like after 2 years.
You know, now saying that it will replace, you know, DSLR or mirrorless, I think it's not yet, you know. And at the end of the day, yeah, if you're just thinking social media, Facebook or Instagram, yeah, honestly, the phone is fine today. You don't need, you know, that's a bit the frustration is like most of the time we're using the top of the line cameras with amazing performance, and it ends up reducing it to a miserable size, and they are mostly seen on the phone today. I think most people now, they don't even use their computer to go on social media. They use it on their phone. So I'll be better with still my D300, you know. But you know, when you are doing commercial photography, then yeah, you need it to print for magazines, for billboards. So the phone, that's a joke. Yeah.
DSLR or mirrorless cameras?
Sorry?
DSLR cameras or mirrorless?
Yeah, and you know, I start to see reviews coming on the Nikon D850, and some of them are like saying, like the best DSLR ever, you know. So it's the reviews are, I mean, sometimes are really, I mean, it's glorifying this new camera. I didn't have the chance yet to test it, but you know, I think this coming from look like serious websites, and they start to compare it with all the others, and it has amazing reviews now. So then you have like Fuji. Apparently, their medium format camera also is quite amazing in terms of dynamic range and everything. And of course, you have those phase one at you know, a $50,000 camera, but yeah, that's a different world, you know. But of course, there will be the progress of camera phone is really exponential during those years, and it will get better. That's for sure. And I hope also in terms of the cameras that we won't have to do blending anymore one day, you know, and the dynamic range will be amazing. And yeah, I don't see why not. I think sometimes the problem is if you discuss maybe on the technical point of view, it's feasible, but it would be too expensive for it to be commercial, you know. Maybe if you had to put like a cooling system on the sensor, so you increase the dynamic range, or, I mean, at the end, you know, the technology is there, but is it commercially viable? You know, lots of beautiful technology have been flushed to the drain because there was no business case for that. And I've been, you know, working in the mobile phone industry and in the technology industry in general, and I've seen so many amazing technologies that, for instance, you know, we're still using FM radio today. There have been digital audio broadcasts with CD quality that you can get on your radio in your car, but commercially not viable. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank Daniel for this amazing lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And please stay tuned. You will get or you will receive an email from us asking you to submit some cityscape photos. And Daniel will choose a winner, and the winner will be rewarded with the Kenya safari trip from Nikon. Then, yeah, that's
okay.
Cool. You will be the winner?
Yeah, you know, sorry, bro, but if I design you, that would be very suspicious, you know. Sorry.
Okay, allow us to take a group photo and give Daniel a thank you certificate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my second one. Actually, I would say third one. You know, I got the big.
This is the second one.
Yeah, I mean, technically the third. No, I got the big.
That's the winner.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Mohammed. Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, you must be shooting at high ISO then.
Yeah.
On Canon? Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget to take your certificate from the reception.
Welcome, my pleasure. And I hope you know, we can do more new stuff. You know. Thanks.
Thank
Hi.
you. Very
Hi.
nice.
Thank you. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Hey, see you. Yeah, nice to see you again.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sir.
Hey, you're welcome.
I really enjoyed it. I'm in love with your editing. It's been amazing. I didn't know that you can do all of this only with Photoshop. Honestly.
Yeah, you know.
I want to join one of your workshops. When do you have one soon in Dubai?
We not soon yet. You know, we wanted to continue that rooftop workshop, but we got access issues.